Hello and welcome to the latest Racing News 365 video where we will be answering your questions surrounding last weekend's brilliant Azerbaijan Grand Prix. From Racing News 365, my name is Nick Golding and I'm joined by 2023 Young Journalist of the Year, Sam Coop, and lead editor Ian Parks, who will be answering your questions. Guys, straight into it. Sam, I'm going to come to you with the first question, and it comes from Thiago Tedeschi. Will Gabriel Bortoleto, who's obviously currently leading the F2 standings, do you think he'll be in F1 next season?
Thank you very much for the question. I mean, it's a bit of a tricky one because there are a number of candidates in the mix for that stake seat, including Gabriel Bortoleto. But based on gut, I can't say with any certainty or confidence that it will be Gabriel Bortoleto. I am pretty confident it will be a rookie driver or an inexperienced driver. So I don't think it'll be Valtteri. I can give you that. Okay. As sure as Valtteri is coming across and sounding, I think they'll go with inexperience next to the experience of Nico Hülkenberg. But then you've got Théo Pourchaire, who, Sauber asked him to deliver the F2 title. He did. Yes, there's new management and is transitioning to Audi, but he is there waiting in the wings. He's proven he can do it. Gabriel Bortoleto, as Nick said, is leading the F2 standings after Baku. Had a brilliant weekend to take the title fight in a kind of not obviously brilliant, but a very assured, get the points on the table when your championship rivals are faltering. Just a mature weekend in which he delivered what he needed to do to put himself in the prime position. So, yeah. That's something that will impress Stake, no doubt. But then also, Franco Colapinto, I just don't think you can discount at this stage either, because he's already showing that he has that quality. And I think he will make Stake sit up and take notice. I mentioned in the podcast that I think he can follow the kind of Lawson blueprint to success in F1. And yes, it won't be with Williams, but Stake is certainly an option. If I'm going to choose between the three of them, I think it is in Bortoleto's favour at the moment. I think he's got the momentum. I think he's got the immediacy of potentially winning the F2 title that might see him hold out over Pourchaire. So yeah, a tricky question, but I think it will be him if push comes to shove.
A tricky but great question. Thiago, thank you very, very much. And if I mispronounce any of these names, I am very apologetic and sorry for that. Doing my best. Ian, we'll come to you next for the next question that comes from Rashad Sanya. Why was Max Verstappen so far behind in the Azerbaijan Grand Prix? Is it him or is it the car, the RB20?
There are a few reasons for that one. Thank you very much, Rashad, for your question. Good to get into this one. Obviously, a very popular topic with all you Red Bull and Max Verstappen fans, of course. First reason is that, as we know, Checo Perez absolutely loves the Baku city circuit. He was going into the weekend the most successful driver around that track. Over the previous 7 editions, he'd won 2 of them. No other driver had done that. So he's got a great affinity with that circuit. However, of course, yes, we know that going into it, the RB20 has come in for quite a bit of criticism from both Checo and Max, especially with regard to its disconnected balance between front and rear. One of the aspects of the Baku city circuit that played into Red Bull's favour is that disconnected balance that I've just mentioned was not so much a factor given the dominance of the corners being 90 degrees, so therefore affected the car less. Another factor that played into Checo's favour was that just one of those weekends where he managed to get the car set up correctly to his liking, whereas Max struggled to that extent. And of course, for the first time in, 33 Grand Prix, guys, if I'm correct in saying, Checo out-qualified Max.
Yeah, correct.
I think the number's correct, 33. Yeah. So Checo started 4th, Max started 6th, and Checo managed to make a good move early on Carlos Sainz to run 3rd, and that's where he stayed for the majority of the race, whereas Max just got stuck in a little bit of traffic And there were two things about Max's RB20 in particular. Christian Horner, the team principal, mentioned after the race that they tried to do a few things differently on Max's car. Now, he didn't go into specific detail with regard to what were these different things that they tried, but that had this knock-on effect. Secondly, as well, Max, as I say, got stuck in a little bit of traffic, and that really affected his rear tyres. We heard him say at one point that he got, I think it was, just looking at my note, getting no rear grip. And that was about the midway point of the race, just after. So he really ran into a bit of tyre trouble there. And at that stage, it was just a case of pretty much limping to the line with the tyres that he'd got, bearing in mind he'd already made the one stop in going from mediums to hards. So just to clarify, Rashad, as you can just explain, there were a number of different reasons behind why Max was really not on the pace as well. Probably another little factor as well that he is really struggling with this car. I think he's got a little bit of a downer on it. The fact that the issues that he's complained about now for a little while just have not been addressed yet. And I'm just now wondering if that's also beginning to get a little bit into his psyche as well, that anything that he feels is wrong with it, he's just exacerbating to a certain extent. So a whole range of things there as to why Max was not as good as Checo.
Rashad, thank you very, very much for your question. Sam, going to come back to you for the next one. And this next question comes from 𝐥𝐢𝐤𝐤. Obviously, ahead of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, McLaren revealed that they would be prioritising Lando Norris, given obviously he is fighting Max Verstappen, or at least is the closest driver to Max Verstappen in the Drivers' Championship. Of course, took a few more points out of him, just 59 points between them now. Do you think, though, McLaren should have allowed Lando to overtake Oscar Piastri in Hungary and Monza, given that if that had happened, Lando would have gained a further 10 points on Max, and the gap would actually be 49 points?
Thank you very much for the question. As Toto Wolff says, hindsight is 2020. So there's an element of looking back, and it's easy to kind of apply the logic. I'm going to split my verdict on this one. Ooh. No for Hungary, yes for Monza. Ultimately, we can truly answer this question in 7 rounds' time. We'll know what the gap is in the championship. You know, if Lando even stays ahead of Oscar in the championship, because at the moment that's not a given. He is ultimately closer to Oscar than he is to Max. So I think with Hungary, it comes down to principle. And there's very strong McLaren ethos of what kind of team do we want to be. And they had already basically said, this is how we're going to operate, this is how we're going to do things. We don't want to be that kind of, that sort of team that prioritizes a driver unduly, takes the first win away from someone like Oscar. So I think they were right to make that call there, even though that was more points that they gave up. However, in Monza, I think you're at that point, papaya rules or not, that you get on the radio and you say to Oscar, look, really sorry, but we're going to have to ask you to give up the second place here. You still get a podium, but you're not giving up a win. You haven't been able to catch Charles. This is 3 points, and that could be pretty important come the end of the season. And Lando is the one in the best position. So I would split my verdict for that reason. But yeah, moving forward, I think they've definitely got to prioritise Lando. But as we've seen in Baku, Oscar is going to make that as difficult as he possibly can.
Makes for a good view. Well, it makes a good viewing for all of us and for all the fans watching at home and at the circuit. 𝐥𝐤𝐤, thank you very much for your question. The next one doesn't come from one particular person, because there are too many people to name who asked this question, and I think it's a good one for all of us to answer. Of course, the big incident that kind of grabbed the headlines in Baku was the penultimate lap crash between Sergio Perez and Carlos Sainz on the back straight between turns 2 and 3. Who was at fault, in our opinions, for the Sainz-Perez crash, or were the stewards correct in deciding to take no further action and effectively judge it as a racing incident? Sam, you can go first, because I need to think.
Thank you, Nick. Ultimately, the stewards came to the right call. In the wording, and as Ian points out in the podcast, they lean on, is a driver predominantly or wholly to blame? And Carlos, whilst probably slightly more responsible for it than Perez, I don't think he was responsible enough to get a penalty for it. If you look at the onboards, yes, he's veering across, but he does stay in a straight line. It's just moving across, and he's following the racing line. He is also ahead of Sergio. What's key as well is that Sergio has space to his left. Sergio could have gone, you know what, actually, this is going to end in a crash. I'm going to back out of it. So there are things he could have done to prevent that incident, as well as Carlos. So that's why I think ultimately the stewards came to a fair decision on that one.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think racing incident. I think that's really interesting that you said, obviously, Sainz, okay, yes, did veer slightly to the left, taking the racing line. If you look at the onboard from any driver on any lap, they all did the exact same, because veering slightly to the left on the exit of the second corner is actually the racing line. It's what they naturally do. And another crucial detail that was revealed by Sergio Perez in the media pen following a quick conversation with Carlos Sainz is that Carlos actually revealed to Sergio that he just couldn't see him because of they were so close, because Sergio was in Carlos's blind spot. And that in itself, plays another role. So I think racing incident, an unfortunate one, because both are having great races, and it was going to be, I think, a brilliant last lap fight for the second and third positions on the podium. Leclerc could have ended up with nothing, but yeah, racing incident for me. Ian, what's your view?
Yeah, I just say we discussed this quite extensively on the podcast, and both of you have made superbly valid points. Difficult to argue against. My view was, as I mentioned in the podcast, that even before the stewards came out with their verdict, having watched the incident many times on the replays, having seen the onboards, it was pretty clear to me that the stewards were going to follow wording that they have used in past documents, that neither driver was wholly or predominantly to blame, even though they did, as Sam pointed out, give a slight nod towards Carlos in this case, but it was not enough for them to determine that it was worthy of a penalty. So yes, as I say, it's not with any degree of hindsight that I'm following the stewards here. I'd already made my call even before I saw the stewards doc, and the stewards agreed with me.
Well, it makes it change that us three all agree on something as well. So that's a first on the Racing News 365 videos. To everyone who asked that question, and there was a lot of you, too many to name. Thank you very much for asking the question. Ian, I'm going to come to you with a final question, and it comes from 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐿. And of course, Oscar Piastri won the race, his second career F1 victory, second of the season. A brilliant overtake on Leclerc on lap 20, a late dive down the inside at turn 1. But what was really interesting, and this is the question itself, why was Oscar so calm after his win?
Hey, Saeed, thank you for the question. Always good to get these questions into, guys. So thank you to everyone that's interacting with us. Please keep bringing them at the end of every Grand Prix weekend. We're happy to answer them, as you can tell.
Absolutely.
Always a delight. And to answer your question specifically, Saeed, it's kind of a strange one, wasn't it, from Oscar? When you think to a certain extent, and we've already discussed the Hungarian Grand Prix a little bit, that one for Oscar might have felt just a little bit tainted, that he wasn't given that. Bearing in mind, everything that unfolded afterwards. But this one was won on merit. This one was initially great qualifying performance, first of all. Okay, yes, 0.3 of a second behind Charles, but nevertheless, did what he needed to do over the first stint. Then when they changed tyres, produced a great move on lap 21. I really don't think Charles was anticipated, because Oscar came from so far back on the end of that start-finish straight, powering into turn 1. Superbly controlled, great craftsmanship behind the wheel again, as we'd seen in Monza with his overtake on Lando there. And then produced what was a tremendous defensive performance for predominantly 28 of the 31 laps that followed, because eventually Charles Leclerc's rear tyres eventually fell off a cliff. So I think that was almost twofold. He said himself that after the Grand Prix that it was one of the, if not the toughest race that he'd ever had to manage in his career. And you can only imagine the pressure that he was feeling from Charles across the course of that 28 laps, the concentration, additionally, over that entire period, not to make a mistake, not to put a wheel wrong, not to make a lock-up in anywhere. It was just a superb performance. So partly I think there might have been a degree of mental exhaustion that come into it. But secondly, knowing Oscar that I do to a certain extent, having interviewed him a few times over the course of this past near enough 20 months now that he's been in Formula One, it's just his nature. He's just a very calm, mild-mannered type of guy. And while I for most drivers, there would have been, relief, celebration. As I say, I just think a degree of exhaustion on one part and just Oscar being who he is, the other part, just combined to give us that air of, just another Sunday drive, really, when actually it was anything but, as we saw.
Cool, calm, and collected. That's the best way to sum up Oscar Piastri Moussaid. Thank you very, very much for your questions. Anybody who wants to ask us questions for these fan question videos, all you've got to do is be following racingnews365.com on Instagram. A couple of hours after every race, a story goes up where you can ask us your questions so we can interact with you, because we love doing it. And of course, for those who are watching this video, if you've got any differing opinions to obviously any of the questions that we discussed, please let us know in the comment section below. It'd be great to hear your thoughts as well. To everyone watching this, make sure to smash that like button, and more importantly, subscribe to the channel. Not only are we approaching 10,000 subscribers, but we are also doing another prize giveaway. In the latest prize giveaway from Racing News 365, we are giving away several scale model F1 cars of your favorite team or driver. How to enter? Well, it could not be any more simple. Just subscribe. All you've got to do, click that red button, you're in the competition. Best of luck to all of you. From myself, Sam, and Ian, we will see you this weekend for the Singapore Grand Prix. See you later.